2019 saw yet another season where the Chicago Bears did not end it by winning a Lombardi trophy. Imagine my lack of surprise. Imagine my disappointment in myself for even getting caught up in the hype of this Bears team in 2019. I don't know what's wrong with me. Maybe it's because it so infrequently happens that they actually have a successful team that coming off of 2018. I actually believed in them even for just a small bit of time. And that, of course, was a mistake. And I knew better. And I did it anyways. Won't be making that same mistake again, that's for sure. Well, certainly, this video will probably not sit well with a lot of Bears fans. Who knows? Maybe it will, but it probably won't. Because when it comes to fan bases and unfounded, unrealistic expectations and naivety and all these other things, Bears fans are at the top of the list. Now, there are still Bears fans that believe that Jay Cutler was actually a franchise NFL quarterback. There are still Bears fans that actually think that Trubisky can be a franchise NFL quarterback. That's the level of reread we can be dealing with sometimes here. So we got to go in with that. But after the disappointment of 2019 and the great season that wasn't surprising to see some big changes on the horizon coming. Certainly it didn't come to the head coach or general manager, where you could argue the real accountability lies. Offensive coordinator Mark Helfrich, offensive line coach, Harry Heistad, and a couple of other offensive assistants were shown the door. In comes Bill Lazor to be the offensive coordinator. Most notably, he had recently worked as the offensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals, and yeah, that was a great experience. And Juan Castillo comes in to coach the offensive line. So certainly some changes made. Interesting dynamic for that is, now that you've changed the underlings, if these underlings are not successful and do not produce results, you can't just fire the underlings this time. Obviously, going into this offseason, there was no way this organization could sit there and look at its fan base, look at the city, look at the team, and say, well, we have full faith and confidence in Mitchell Trubisky to be the starter. We're not going to bring in any competition to question that. So you knew the Bears are going to go get some type of veteran in the offseason because they didn't have the draft pick capital to go get a guy. So they were going to have to find somebody. So, of course, with some of the other names out there, they somehow landed on Nick Foles, a guy that was so impressive to Jacksonville that a year after they had intentionally overpaid him to make a statement to be their guy, they were willing to cut their losses and get him the hell out of Duvall. Just think about that. Ryan Pace said, lube it up, baby. I'm on a nut. I saw some other changes. Leonard Floyd was let go. They didn't end up exercising the fifth-year option. In comes Robert Quinn and Jimmy Graham, and I know that may not excite some of you, it may excite others of you. I don't really know, and I don't know that I necessarily care. Prince Amukamura was cut. Then you saw Eddie Goldman opt out. So when you look at this team, when you're going into an offseason and you're saying, hey, you expected 2019 to be something different than it ultimately was, you would have liked to have seen some massive improvements to the roster and some massive changes, or at least some improvements and some changes. You got some changes. I just don't know how much you got in the way of improvements. Now, as a team like the Bears, sitting there in the middle of the road after 2019, you would say, okay, you go to the draft, and maybe you can find a couple of guys that can come in and contribute and kind of help turn things around. Well, of course, you didn't have the first-round pick because of this trade. Still had to pay the price for that one. You had the 2 second-round picks, and ultimately, the first of the second-round picks you spend on the tight end position by drafting a guy from Notre Dame and Cole Kmet, who certainly has upside and can be an NFL starter. But you wonder just how much his upside is. And on top of that, you're also talking about a team that needed immediate contributions out of this draft class. You're drafting your first pick as a position where there just isn't usually that much immediate contribution. So long-term may pay off. Short-term, I don't know. The Jalen Johnson pick certainly is probably going to have more immediate payoff and benefit. Now, that could come just more based out of situation and circumstance than actual true talent itself. But Jalen Johnson, to me, projects as a long-term, at least number 2 corner in the NFL. So Not the worst of draft classes, but you have to hesitate a little bit when you're talking about Ryan Pace because some of those early notable picks that have been made by him have not been good. Just look at the history. So now, as you kind of look forward and you look ahead to what's coming up in 2020, you certainly, just like with any team, you've got reasons for optimism and you've got reasons for concern. I think if I looked at reasons for optimism, you still got several stars on that defense. You still got Khalil Mack. You've got a hopefully returning fully healthy Akeem Hicks. You've got Eddie Jackson. You've got Kyle Fuller. You've got 4 legit Pro Bowlers on that defense. So that's a good place to start. A lot of teams wish they had that level of talent on either side of the ball. Bears, of course, because they're a backwards organization, instead of having it on the offensive side of the ball, as always, they choose to have it on the defensive side of the ball. But you have a really good core and a really good foundation to build with on that side of the ball. And then you hope guys like Roquan Smith can develop in year number 3 and become the type of guy that you would expect out of taking an inside linebacker in the top 10. Your free agent signing, Robert Quinn. Now you're playing him opposite of Khalil Mack. How will Quinn adjust to this system in Chicago remains to be seen, but certainly at least has to be viewed as an upgrade compared to Leonard Floyd. So you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, you have the potential for Smith to get even better. You have a potential for Quinn to be better than Floyd. If you can keep those 4 core guys healthy all year, it probably bodes pretty well for them in that defense. Then I think you look at the offensive side of the ball, and I actually do like the young receiving core quite a bit. Allen Robinson is a legit number 1 and a legit stud. My dude Anthony Miller, wide receiver 1. I certainly thought you saw flashes of 2019 showing what Anthony Miller could be, and it's been unfair to him the fact that he's been saddled with Trubisky. That does impact the full potential being unleashed from what this Miller kid can do. But when you look at some of the other young receivers, you look at Ridley and you look at Mooney, you bring in a Ted Ginn Jr. now, not a young guy, but still. I think this receiving core for the Bears has the potential to be a little bit underrated. And I like some of the weapons that they have at play here. And if Mooney or Ginn can fill that, kind of Tyreek Hill light role in this offense, then it could certainly open up some possibilities for them. And I look at overall roster continuity. This is still a team that 2 years ago, 2018, won the division, made the playoffs. A lot of that core is still in place. It's really hard to keep everybody from one year to the next just due to economics, just due to reality of free agency and contract demands and everything else. But the Bears are still in a good position in terms of the fact that they've still got the vast majority of their core from 2 years ago still in the fold. Not everybody, but they haven't necessarily been raped or depleted as of right now. No. So if you're looking for reasons for optimism, they are certainly there. I also think another reason for optimism is you could definitely make an argument that the rest of the division did not really get much better. Certainly did not. Like you were expecting the Packers potentially to really invest heavily on the offensive side of the ball to help out Aaron Rodgers. And it's certainly at least questionable in the short term what they did in the draft and what they did or did not do in the offseason in terms of free agency. You look at the Vikings and they've made some changes and they've made some moves. Are they necessarily going to be a better team for that? I don't know about that. And then you've got the Lions. What more can you say? So if you're looking and saying, hey, the Bears could play similar to last year, the Vikings and Packers could come back to them a little bit, and that makes the Bears a little more likely to be a 10 or 11 win team. I can certainly understand that. There's potentially some validity there. But you got a lot of concerns with this Bears team. Before we get to the most obvious of ones, I look at that secondary. You got Eddie Jackson, you got Kyle Fuller. It's a great place to start. But what are you going to get out of Deion Bush as the other safety position? You don't have Adrian Amos. You don't have Clinton Dix. What are you going to have there with Deion Bush or anybody else that's going to start opposite him? What are you going to get out of Jalen Johnson opposite of Kyle Fuller? He's going to get picked on early and he's going to get picked on often, or anybody else that is lined up in that corner 2 spot. That's got to be a concern. Also, the running game. You got David Montgomery potentially missing a game or 2 to start the season with the groin injury, but even if he's healthy, you did not see a consistent effort or focus to employ the running game and create any type of identity there with the running game. The Lions blocking at times in the running game was absolutely atrocious last year. And you look at, there's a lack of depth there. Like, if a David Montgomery goes down, then you're left with Tariq Cohen, and then what the hell else do you have? Seriously, what the hell else do you have? When you're talking about a Bears team that's structured in a way to where they're not going to light the world on fire outscoring everybody. They've got to have an element of ball control and physicality in their offense. You really, really worry about that running game and their ability to do that. I think also as a part of a larger concern is when you look at organizations and you look at teams traditionally that get themselves into a title contending situation. You look at teams that over the previous 4 to maybe 6 or 7 years have hit on a lot of their draft picks and certainly have hit on their first round picks, and the Bears just don't have that. Kevin White, 2015, ended up flaming out. Leonard Floyd was a disappointment in 2016. He's now gone. We already know Trubisky, 2017. We already know what he is. 2018, Roquan Smith, you look at him and you say, good player, but is he truly great? Does he have the potential to truly be great? And frankly, I don't know that I've seen enough there to indicate that to me that he could truly be great. And when you're taking inside linebacker top 10, you want him to be great. I haven't seen greatness from him yet. And then you look, obviously, 2019, 2020, both of those first-round picks were invested in Khalil Mack. At least you could say those 2 first-round picks kind of panned out, but at the same point in time, it ultimately reminds you of a very important lesson that you don't make a move like that unless you are really damn cocksure about your quarterback situation with your young quarterback. Ryan Pace was way more confident than he should have been, and the Bears ultimately are paying the price for that. Because the biggest concern of all, even when you get past the kicker part, the fact that they were bringing in Santos to even compete with Pinheiro is concerning in and of itself. So it makes you wonder where his 2019 was a little bit better in terms of the kicking game. You worry 2020, is it going to be more of the same of what we saw in 2018? You got to go to the quarterback position. I mean, just looking at the way the whole offseason has kind of played out, there's a debate about Trubisky or Foles. Who had the better day? This is how bad it is. You're debating between Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles. One guy that was so bad you didn't even pick up his 5th-year option versus another guy that a year after getting franchise quarterback level money from a team with them intentionally overpaying him, they didn't want any part of him and they were willing to just get rid of the contract to take a 4th-round pick in return. That's what we're talking about here with the Bears. That's the level of quality we're talking about in 2020 with this quarterback position. Yeah. And what should really be concerning right now, if you're a Bears fan, is you could look at it from a positive and say, hey, there's not a lot of camp hype or camp buzz about this team, and that could potentially work to their advantage. And it certainly could. It certainly could. But that could also mean that there isn't a lot of buzz or hype about it because there's nothing good to report about the quarterback position. The mere fact that Nick Foles hasn't come in and blown the doors off and easily trounced Trubisky means Mitch should be the week 1 starter against the Lions, period. Starting Foles would be stupid. You bring in a guy like Foles, he should have to show you enough to justify the trade, which again makes it look even more idiotic that Ryan Pace did what he did by trading for him. If you're going to do that, you should just sign Cam Newton for a year, you dummy. Good Lord. Why would you have any confidence in the season if you're a Bears fan, really? You know their history, you know their trend, you know their pattern. You're finding out more and more that the general manager is not good. 1 playoff appearance in 5 years is not a justification to defend this guy. He screwed up once at the most important position on the field. And you could argue with the Foles trade is now screwed up twice. Why do you have reasons for optimism this year? Because if you look at it, you say, what happens if Akeem Hicks goes down again? I look at this defense, and I'm sorry, I'm not buying the elite crap. They certainly weren't in 2019, and they weren't even as good as the stats may have shown because their offense was so bad that teams didn't have to score 30 points against them. But at key moments and key points in time where a truly elite defense would have stepped up and shut other folks down, the Bears D under coordinator Chuck Pagano failed to do it time after time after time. So again, any notable injuries on that defense, you saw the impact that had in 2019. Why would 2020 be any different? And eventually, they've been kind of tempting fate and getting lucky, or eventually those chickens are going to come home to roost. And then you look at the quarterback position, my fucking God, this is going to be a disaster all year. 11-5 division champs, my ass. This is a 5-11, 6-10 football team. It is. They can certainly exceed expectations. But if your expectations are anything more than 5 or 6 wins, you're kidding yourself. They suck at the most important position. Their head coach wasn't nearly the same in 2019 as 2018. Their defense took a step back in 2019, yet magically they're going to figure it out in 2020. Their defense was so great that when one guy went down, there was a significant drop-off. Anybody else see the problem here? The real problem is no matter what happens with the Bears this season, it's a no-win situation. Anything short of winning the Lombardi Trophy, it is all a gigantic waste of time. This team goes 11-5 and wins the division, either with Trubisky or Foles as their starter. That's not good for them for the long term. They go 5-11. Well, you finally have the excuse to fire Pace, which means you're going to fire Nagy, which, dear God, would hope that it finally means that Ted Phillips would be fired, although ain't no fucking way that's going to happen. Like, this is the ultimate of a can't-win year. Make the playoffs. Once you get there, don't do shit. Whoop-de-doo. Now you're just creating more confusion. You're just gumming up things and making it a bigger mess for 2021. Go 5-11, 6-10, and it makes it obvious you got to start over again. I ain't getting any younger. I'm getting tired of that crap too. But why have reason for hope or feel like there is a promise of great things to come from this team in 2020? Not Bears fans. You know better. And even a winning record doesn't mean things are a whole lot better. Like, is that how low the bar is now? Is that how low we have allowed the McCaskey family to set the bar? They went 9-7. They might slide in as the 7th seed. Gives a shit. Get real. This team sucks, and we're going to find out just how much this year.